I think that if Canada is going to even consider, if our government is going to even consider a policy of allowing mass volumes of Americans to come and immigrate here to escape the regime that we're watching build in the US, they absolutely positively need to get the permission from the Canadian people.
You know, if you told me 2 years ago, let's say summer 2024, that there would be a mass exodus of US citizens trying to get into Canada, I probably would have laughed. Because half of their citizens can't even locate Canada on a map. Now, if you're a US citizen following my channel, I'm not talking about you. You guys are cool. But unfortunately, some of your fellow citizens, they're just making the world shake their head way too much these days. But the topic of today's video might be a bit controversial, because even I don't even know how to think about this. You can see in the caption here, do we want to accept US citizens in mass numbers? For me, on one hand, sure, I would take the nurses, the professionals, all of the people that can actually contribute to Canada. On the other hand, are these US citizens who are fleeing their country, are they going to bring their belief system with them? So it's kind of a hard debate. And in today's video, we're going to talk about that. The backdrop for today's video comes from Andre, who has been a follower of my channel since I think the beginning. And he's also from Vancouver. And the photo that you're looking at comes from English Bay in downtown Vancouver. I always love seeing photos from home. And Andre has been very reliable in sending me photos from all over downtown Vancouver. And it's really nice to see, especially now that I'm on the other side of the world. So thank you again, Andre, for reminding me of where I'm from. Okay, so back on the topic of whether or not we want US citizens migrating to Canada. Let's start with the first report.
I was born in Notre Dame de Ham.
Growing up in a small Massachusetts town, Mary and Ryan Hamill always knew of their French-Canadian roots.
French meat pie was a staple, split pea soup.
Ryan's great-grandfather immigrated to the U.S. from Quebec in the early 1900s. Mary's great-great-grandfather came in the late 1800s. More than a century later, the American couple, already living and working in Montreal, is now set to become Canadian themselves, taking advantage of a new law.
I love, now that I live in Quebec and we're getting the lay of the land and visiting more places, I can look in the maps and say, oh, this is where Nana was born.
Bill C-3, nicknamed the Lost Canadians Act, opens the door for people with Canadian ancestors to apply for citizenship.
Now, I know the opinions on this among the GTL community is going to be all over the place. There's going to be some people that say, welcome in the US citizens. There are going to be others that say, no way, stay in your own country and fix your own problems. But regardless of what we say, the Canadian government is opening the door with this new bill, C3 or whatever it's called. And you can bet that there's going to be thousands, if not maybe even millions, of US citizens who are going to try to see if they can qualify for this. But my question is Canada going to be ready for this?
Great-grandmother, great-grandfather, great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. It does not matter. There's no limit on how many generations you can go back, as long as you can prove it.
The new legislation is creating overwhelming demand here at the National Archives in Montreal. In January alone, Quebec archivists received more than 1,000 requests to authenticate birth records, up from just 32 in the same month last year.
So you can see the demand is there, going from 32 last year to over 1,000 this year. That is not a small jump.
The process is lengthy. We have to go back to the original register, which is not always in a great state just because it's so old.
With significant economic migration from Quebec to New England in the late 1800s and early 1900s, about 10 million Americans could be eligible to become Canadian, according to this historian.
Now I gotta pause again. But if you think about that, 10 million possible US citizens are qualified to migrate to Canada. Now, I don't think all 10 million will, but if they did, that's already 24% of our population. So my question is Canada even ready for this? Or do we even want this?
Very excited to have this sense that there's an official recognition that they still belong to something.
Birthplace, Canada.
The Hamills are finalizing their citizenship applications, planning to stay in Montreal, driven north by the political climate in the U.S.
I already feel Canadian in at least my heart.
Finding a new home and sense of belonging through ancestors, generations apart. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Montreal.
So whether we like it or not, there's going to be a lot of people migrating to Canada very soon. I want to give my full personal thoughts on this. But before I do that, I want you guys to hear this other fellow Canadian citizen and her point of view on this.
As Canadians, I think we need to ask ourselves a really serious question. Would we want to accept a mass number of American immigrants into Canada? Okay. Now we're watching the United States implode. Now the Trump administration is not even hiding the fact that they're creating a fascist regime. They're posting all kinds of white supremacy stuff online. They're saying that ICE has carte blanche. They can do whatever they want. They'll never be held accountable. They're closing the borders faster than ever. And now they're saying they're going to be monitoring their own people when they're traveling through airports. So it's happening. We're all watching it happen. And I know that sane Americans are terrified and they're looking for an exit. I'm seeing more and more and more videos online, TikToks of Americans trying to figure out how the hell they're going to leave Dodge. Now, the far right here in Canada, the Maple Mag they're going on and whining and complaining about all of the mass migration, of course, because it's brown people, that have come into Canada and our social systems can't support them. They're right on that sense. Absolutely. There's been way too many. We've accepted more than the country can support and have. And it's affecting all of our social systems for sure. There's no argument there. So why would we make an exception for Americans? That's the first argument. Second one is the personal opinion for me, because I'm on the fence with the idea of accepting a massive amount of Americans, even though I don't think that the American government's going to allow that. The cultures between the United States and Canada are very different. Americans are, me, myself, and I, very individualistic. You can see it. And any American who claims that that's not true, dude, you need to look in the mirror, because that is what America is. Me, myself, and I, USA, best country in the world, even though it's become the toilet of the planet at the moment.
Okay, Pamela's actually pretty funny. I've never heard anyone call the United States the toilet of the planet. But when she brought up the topic of culture differences between Canada and the United States, this is actually what really concerns me. From an outside point of view, let me use an example here in Malaysia. For the people that I meet, they always say, "Are you American?" That's the first thing they will say. And trust me, that pisses me off to no end. But I always say, no, I'm not American, I am Canadian. There are major differences between Canada and the United States, and our culture and how we are is completely different than what the United States is. Then I usually have to go into a bit of a teaching session on what the difference between Canada and the United States is. But honestly, I don't blame them. I mean, being out here over in Southeast Asia, it's pretty far from North America, and their exposure to North America is whatever's on TV. So I can't really fault them for that. But my point of this little story is that Canadians, me, I take pride in being Canadian and also having our own culture and not being the same as the United States. So with this potential mass migration of US citizens potentially coming to Canada, am I worried about this? Yeah, yes and no. And I'll explain a little bit later.
And Canadian culture is we've always been much more socialist, right? Our Medicare systems, we believe in taking care of each other. We're known globally being kind, always saying sorry and please and thank you and all that stuff. Now, as we're seeing already here in Canada with when there's a mass volume of the same group of people that come into another country, the culture of that receiving country gets diluted. And we're seeing it live. People are whining, complaining about it. It is the nature of what it is, when it trickles in the way it always did in the past, people tend to assimilate for the most part into the receiving country. But when there's a huge amount of them in a short period of time, that assimilation doesn't happen naturally. And if we do that with Americans, that's exactly what's going to happen. Do we really want Canada looking like the United States? Because if we would accept a mass volume of them in a short period of time, because they're trying to, like I said, leave Dodge, that would happen. They would want Canada to look like what they think the United States is.
Now, I don't 100% agree with that. I mean, there's going to be some US citizens that want Canada, they might move to Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, wherever else. They're going to move there, and they're going to expect the same things that they had in the United States. But this is just my opinion, and this is my belief that, what I would like to happen. I would like to believe that many of the US citizens that are trying to flee their country already know and believe that the United States is not the best country in the world. I mean, take, for example, the US citizens who are in the healthcare industry that have decided to move to Canada. And from the interviews that I've seen, it seems like they're actually welcoming and embracing the Canadian culture, and they're glad to get rid of the US culture that they grew up with. But this is not going to be the case for every single US citizen migrating to Canada. And I think Canadians need to be prepared for this.
Do we want that as a country? I think that if Canada is going to even consider, if our government is going to even consider a policy of allowing mass volumes of Americans to come and immigrate here to escape the regime that we're watching build in the US, they absolutely positively need to get the permission from the Canadian people. Because your toxicity, America, has already spilled all across the border. We're seeing it with Maple MAGA. Alberta might as well be Texas. And I just feel like, and I don't mean all Albertans are that. No, I lived in Alberta and at Calgary for 3 years. Canadian, every province in Canada has wonderful people across the country. But, this whole Maple MAGA movement, with PP at the head, it is MAGA. We don't need more of that disease spreading across the country, is my point. And I'm sure that it wouldn't be MAGA people that would be wanting to come to Canada from the US. But your culture is that we're the best country in the world, USA. And Canada doesn't need that. And it's awful to say that because I so empathize with the Saint Americans who just want to get out because they're terrified. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I think she's correct in saying that it's probably not going to be MAGA migrating to Canada. I mean, I think most of MAGA probably doesn't even know where Canada is. But for those US citizens who are most likely going to be Democrats that are wanting to move to Canada, I have a hunch that they're probably sick and tired of the US culture to begin with. Because if they weren't, they wouldn't consider moving to Canada. But out of the thousands of US citizens that are considering moving to Canada, there's going to be a few that are going to still try to carry their US exceptionalism, I guess, into Canada. And how do we contain that? I have no idea. I'm not an expert in this. But my stance on this whole topic, have I given up on the US? Yes, I have. Have I given up on the citizens? A majority of them, yes. But not all of them. And why is that? Because ever since I started this channel, I've actually been interacting with a lot of US citizens who are completely fed up with what's going on. And you can see my inbox. I still have a whole ton of emails that are unread. But I've had dozens, maybe even close to 100 people from the US telling me that they're fed up with their culture. They're fed up with the US exceptionalism. They're embarrassed. And they want a fresh start. So if these are the US citizens that are wanting to come into Canada, I would welcome them. But if it's US citizens who still believe the US is the best country in the world, and they're going to bring their ignorance, arrogance, and exceptionalism to Canada, I would say no thanks to these ones. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What's your stance on it? I'm pretty sure we're going to get a variety of different opinions in the comments. So I'm actually really curious to see everyone's comments. Now I got one more video I want to show. It's from a US citizen who is traveling the world, and I guess he's in Japan at the moment. And he explains how he's been treated in every country he's gone to. Let's take a look.
I'm in Japan right now, and every single time that I say that I'm from the United States, people look at me with disdain and disgust, and I have to explain myself every fucking time. I've been to Europe, the same fucking thing applies. It is embarrassing at this point. I have no words for it anymore. It's just disgusting and embarrassing. I have no fucking words.
Now, if you look at this guy's video, it seems like he's understanding of how shitty his country is. So I don't think there's any US exceptionalism here. But it is a shitty situation for any US citizen that's traveling. Because it's your fellow citizens as well as your president that's causing these reactions from people globally. And it's unfortunate for US citizens who are traveling the world. Now they have to open a conversation by apologizing. Because if you don't, people are going to automatically assume that you voted for the orange guy. Now, when I saw this video, I went straight to the comments. And what really pissed me off is this. It's US citizens saying that they're Canadians when they're traveling abroad. And they're not even hiding it. For a society and country that believes that they are the best in the world, I find it very odd that you have to hide your identity when you're traveling abroad. I mean, America's first, the land of the free, the home of the brave, and all that other bullshit. Yet, when you're traveling, I'm Canadian. Like this person, Coco. Fuck you, Coco. Go be proud of your own country and stop flag-jacking Canada's flag. As much as we want this to stop, it's not going to. And to be honest, all I can do is laugh at it. I've had a few incidents of flag-jacking in the past that I've called out. But I haven't had any yet since I actually moved out here. But here in Kuala Lumpur, I'm always keeping an eye out. If I see somebody wearing a Canadian flag, or they got something on that's, representing Canada, I'm going to approach them. Because I'm either going to meet a Canadian out here, and it's going to be nice to catch up and, meet another Canadian in Southeast Asia. Or I'm going to meet somebody that's flag jacking. In the past, I gave them a chance to explain themselves. And, both times they actually apologized and, it turned out well. But I'm still waiting for that one day when I meet someone who's flagjacking in the Canadian flag and takes it as a joke, because I'm going to let them have it. All right, that's all I got for today's video. If you found any value or agree with anything I said, or you want to hear more from a Canadian and international perspective without the US media bias, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button below so you're notified of my future videos. And if you want to watch more of my videos, check out the ones that will appear on your screen shortly. Now, before I go, if you're waiting for the co-host, I actually closed the door for this one because I wanted to do a video in peace. She was very noisy in the first video that I did today, so you can watch that one again if you want to hear her. But otherwise, you'll have to wait for tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.